Hello and welcome. My name is Carol Carter and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are all about creating a capable and diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, underrepresented leaders into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. So we're delighted that you're here with us today, and our K-12 education leaders, Dr. Bena Kallick and Erika Twani, have a special program today because we are coming out of COVID, and people's well-being and their state of mind, their ability to be resilient is first and foremost. So I'm delighted to welcome both Kirsten Durward and Fanny Passeport, and Erika Twani will share more about them and the relationship that we have with Global Minded and what they will be covering today. So welcome everyone who's joining us.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Erika Twani. I'm the CEO of Learning One-to-One and author of the most recent book called Become a Teacher. Let's see if you can see it. There we go. So I would ask each of the participants, panelists today, to give a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll get started. Fanny?
Hi everyone, so happy to be here. My name is Fanny Passeport. I'm currently in France. I'm the founder of No Borders Learning, and I'm trying to support schools and fearless educators in co-constructing healthy learning ecosystems. So I'm also an author, passionate about wellness and deep learning.
So Kirsten?
Hi everybody, I'm Kirsten. I live in Thailand, but I'm from Scotland, and I'm an educator who works with schools and teachers to improve learning. And just over a year ago, I had the mad idea of starting a support group for teachers transitioning to remote learning, which went crazy and has about 130,000 educators in it. So my team over there on Facebook has been doing a lot to support educator well-being and educator development throughout this tricky time.
And finally, Bena.
Hi, I'm Bena Kallick, and I am the co-author of many books on habits of mind, and also Students at the Center with Allison Zamuda, Habits of Mind with Dr. Art Costa. And I've been in education probably longer than all of the people in this panel, but still going strong and feeling excited about this next iteration. Like, where do we go from here? So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So we wanted to get started with a sort of a practice with Kirsten that Kirsten brought to us today. So Kirsten, would you like to get started? There you go.
Yeah, so I'm just going to share something with you that I used to do at all my, sorry, it's not starting in the right place, of course, all my presentations at school, whether it was at school or at an event, and that I use now when I'm doing online training. So let's just land in the room, because I know there's a lot of difficult things going on in people's lives, and let's just let go of that for now. Let's just land in the room. Let's give ourselves the time and the focus to be here and now, and the permission just to let go of everything else. And I've got a little something that's very beautiful to help you with that. We're just going to breathe, listen, and watch for less than a minute. Just breathe in rhythm with the flower. It's very, very powerful. finding a moment just to connect with beauty and just to bring yourself mindfully into the session, and hopefully you can carry that practice with you as you go forward too.
Thank you, Kirsten. So we wanted to get started with an introduction about what this session is all about, right? I'm based in the US, and I work with many different teachers from all over the world. And especially in the US, we have the news that about 25% of teachers are reported not to come back to the next school year. 25%. It's a quarter of the teachers. And at the same time, we're talking about, personalized learning. We're talking about more of a closer relationship with the students, and we're losing teachers. And this session is about how we can improve this well-being of teachers to make sure that they have, personal well-being, but also the community well-being. So for that, we would love to discuss a little bit about how did we get to this point. For me, I can give you a story. 2 years ago, I live in Florida, and 2 years ago, we had a major hurricane. It was a category 1, so categories go from 1 through 5. But the hurricane set in town, so you can just imagine the problem that we had. We were without power for a couple of days, and the thing is, I live in a neighborhood, and I've always taken care of my house, right? And it's the good roof and good structure. But my neighbor never took care of his house. And after the hurricane, it was a complete mess. So you could see 2 houses, one next to the other. One was in a good shape. The other one was in a bad shape, roof all over the place. The point is, for me, I can compare with COVID-19, when it hit, it exposed the challenges that we have in the education system, right? And if we were prepared, we wouldn't be suffering what we suffered right now. But I would love to hear from Kirsten, which she shared with us that she's in touch with over 130,000 teachers. Kirsten, what have you heard from these teachers?
Oh, so much. I mean, the interesting thing for us about our group was that we started as a small group of international educators, because what we noticed was that some of us were very well prepared and had a lot of training and had plans in place because our schools had been looking forward to, being prepared for the crisis. And there were other people who were in strife, so we decided to help. And this all kind of went quite smoothly until we had a panic arrive from about 60,000 people in the US in one day, from districts and schools that hadn't any plans and hadn't had any trainings, and they were literally in a panic mentality. So it was very interesting to sort of see that difference, and then coming on and seeing some of the interesting conversations that have been through between teachers operating in different countries, and seeing the different stresses that they're under. And even like within one country, the different kind of stresses that they're under, and also the way in which they cope. So it's interesting, like my friend Dennis, he's in rural Uganda, and his school has been completely closed for a year, and he hasn't even been able to see the kids. And all he wants is a photocopier so that he can photocopy things to take out to the kids. And at the same time, he's on the same group with people who are, dealing with other issues of equity and lack of resources, but they're much more stressed about it. So it's just interesting to see the dynamic, and to see like the pressures that different systems put on educators, and how some educators they have their own like practices and ways of dealing with things, and others feel a bit lost. And I know from a lot of feedback that I've been given that for a lot of people, particularly in the first 6 months, the group was kind of a haven for them, because they felt it was a safe place they could go to and ask for help and not be judged. And I think that that's something that really comes from certain education systems is this feeling of being judged, being compared. It's very hard line, it's very fear driven. It's and rather than like focusing on relationships, which is where we come from naturally as educators, it's focused on like hard-edged achievement and proving certain achievements on things that sometimes don't even make sense to us. So I think, you know, educators in some countries were already confused, and then they were more confused by this. They lost their identity, because when they couldn't get into school and they couldn't connect with the kids, it was like, what am I doing this for? Because everything else had already been so hard. And then suddenly that identity, that feeling of connection, that feeling of relationship building was taken away as well. So I don't think many people in the world understand how painful this has been for many, many educators across the globe.
Thank you, Kirsten. So Fanny, obviously you're the youngest one in this group and you work with a lot of teachers, young teachers. What's your perspective in terms of, does this hit younger teachers harder than older teachers? Is there any difference, or what do you think?
I've been thinking about the statistics that you shared, and like, why are there so many teachers quitting? And I came up to this idea that maybe there might be 3 reasons. At least that's what I'm thinking right now is, I've discovered the difference between burnout and demoralization. And I think that's something to think about, because when we are burned out, we are actually, this is when we are at the brink of exhaustion, right? We are physically completely exhausted. We definitely just need to rest and be in a healthier work environment. So I think we have been experiencing this a lot in schools. We can see this through some posts that are actually glorifying teachers who are exhausted. And that was something I wanted to bring, because it seems like sometimes you see different kind of posts about well-being, and some of them are like more about hygiene. Well-being, taking care of ourselves, goes much beyond taking a shower and massaging our feet. Is really something that we need. It's a need, and if we don't attend to our needs, we know that we show degradation. So there is burnout going on. And I think it's not okay to glorify teachers who are in the hospital and continuing to attend to their students. At this point, we are modeling something really unhealthy. So just maybe refocusing that resilience isn't about this selfless and suffering kind of attitude and behavior, and self-care should not be an act of courage and rebellion. It should be something, a need that we attend to. The demoralization, on the other hand, I've seen it a lot on social media through posts of colleagues, teachers, is the disconnect between my belief as a teacher and the belief of my organization. And because we are in a time of crisis, we see problems exacerbated. So then we realize that, do I really want to be here? I'm okay. I can hold on physically, but mentally I'm really tired because I can't express what I believe in, and that's really, really difficult. That's when you don't align and when you feel you're losing your integrity. And then maybe another one is kind of self-selection. Perhaps, I don't know. I call this non-adaptive. Is maybe some teachers leave because they don't really want to try something new, because this is shaking our practices a lot. And some teachers are really taking this as an opportunity to grow. And even if it's really hard, at the same time, what an opportunity, what an amazing opportunity to try something new. And others are like, I just want to go to the comfort of perhaps my convenience. So these are some of the things that I've been thinking about. I don't know, what do you all think? And if you want to add.
No, it's great, Fanny. Thank you so much. And Bena, your perspective as a global leader as well would be great. I mean, some schools have already implemented and have been using habits of mind for decades. And what have you seen out there?
Well, you know, first I want to interact a little bit with what you said, Fanny, because, and both of you actually, Kirsten and Fanny, because I think that this is something that we can pay attention to. And I think what you discovered, Kirsten, when 60,000 people suddenly popped up one day and said, my gosh, this is what I need. I need this sense of collaboration. I need this feeling of togetherness. And also, I think that the people in the US in particular, and that's just, I work internationally, but I do notice that the people in the US particularly have a hard time realizing that there is an international environment and an international educational understanding. And when they do, it's usually just with private schools or some of the IB schools, but it isn't really the sense of what we're learning and what we have the access to learning about people in Nigeria, in West Africa, and also in Asia. And also, what does Singapore tell us? Because we keep holding Singapore up high. So how do we really begin to think about this? It relates to what you're saying, Fanny, because I think what it does is there's something, when you call it demoralization, I think demoralization can be broken down into a couple of different ways of looking. And one is that demoralization is also something, there's a psychological term for it. It's called de-skilling. And what it is basically is that when you de-skill people, what you do is you take away from them what they know, and you rename it and you relabel it in such a way that they feel like they're nowhere and they know nothing. And rather, I think we in education, over all the years that I've been working with it, have what I would call that kind of social amnesia, which is that we forget what we know because we're constantly being told what we don't know. And so I think that the demoralization is really one in which we have, in fact, taken what we do in education and we continue to make it increasingly more complex when perhaps its simplicity is one of the greatest things. And that's back to what you said, Kirsten. It's all about relationships. It's all about how you feel about the kids. And so when you're robbed from having that opportunity to see the light in their eyes, because they're now, with the screens are black and all you see is names, and sometimes you have no idea whether they're there or they're not there, and you begin to ask yourself, what's going on here? And it has really, in my mind, it has awakened all of us to realize that what we assumed, we have to check our assumptions now. So I would say, from the perspective of habits of mind, it's really interesting to me to understand how the habits of mind have really served as a kind of classical anchor for your thinking in this sense. I hear teachers asking some of the simplest questions, like, for example, while you were in a hybrid situation, students, while you were in a hybrid, just tell us one thing that you did that really helped you to persist. You see, I think we forget that the habits of mind are all about your capacity to kind of be a thinker. And so relationships and thinking, I believe, help us. And then the third thing in terms of burnout that you were talking about is that we feel as a profession that we don't have a voice, not that we don't have a voice in what we believe and value, we don't have a voice in a political arena in which everything has been so politicized that we sometimes forget what really matters, because we are in the middle of such frenzy around such political issues that keep forgetting that it's actually all about the kids. It's all about what we want to see happening for the future. And so I think that all of those things kind of fit in the mix.
Thank you so much, Bena. For the quick introduction, everyone, now let's go to the meat. What we really want is practical strategies that we can use today to maintain our personal and our community's well-being. So I'll get started, kicked off. What I've noticed is that we have always continued to learn. Learning is our best solution. Whenever we face anything that is beyond our control or beyond our understanding, the best thing to do is to learn. And I do believe that, the phenomenon that we've seen here, that we've been sharing in the group in general, is that people flock together, and those were able to maintain their sanity, right? So the most important thing for me is to continue to learn. The second thing is to focus on learning things that will help you with the dynamics of the daily activities. In my case, my organization worked with about 5,000 teachers last year, and mainly on developing habits of autonomous learning. Beyond the need of anything, I do believe that when students learn to become autonomous learners, they'll be able to learn anywhere, anytime. So that helped us immensely and helped those teachers immensely, to the point that we've shared continuously throughout last year. And I just launched this book because of this need. What are the simplest way to help students to make sure that they continue to learn regardless of where they are? And even if they come back to school, they'll continue to learn. So I'll leave you with those 2 points for now, and I'll pass the ball to Fanny to share a little bit of what are the some practical ways that teachers can use today.
Yes, I was agreeing a lot with what you said. It's really fascinating. I agree with the autonomy piece a lot, and obviously throughout the system. So we know that when leaders are autonomy supportive, then teachers feel much better. Their self-efficacy is improved, and they are better teachers in the classroom. There is a better learning outcome, so it cascades down to the classroom. So I think autonomy supportive practices in general throughout the system, especially when leaders can also model this and really help the teachers experience it, so they can then do it with the students. And in terms of self-care, mindfulness, I think it's really important to take the time to breathe as an individual. So I have written on that a couple of years ago on the book Stretch Yourself, and now I'm trying to say, don't talk about stretch because we are overstretched. So one of the first chapter before stretching was breathing, and so I have created a few meditations that will be shared under resources, I guess, after this. So some meditations for teachers, also for students in French. I had created one for my students. And recently with my co-author, we created a pandemic meditation for teachers, specifically for them to take the time to remember that they're doing enough and really resisting the imposter syndrome and being self-compassionate. So I have also shared in the sections, in the resources, some templates for self-coaching. That's just a way for teachers to also remember that when you're planning something, this can help you to focus and to then lose less time on searching outside and going inside and remembering how much gift and treasures you have inside of, and kind of using your own resourcefulness. And something I'm passionate about, but I don't want to go in details right now because that's like, I'm going to take this session otherwise. It's the self-determination theory, which is for me a perfect explanation of, again, how you should attend to your own basic psychological needs for relatedness, that sense of belonging and inclusion, competence, knowing that you are empowered, you can. If you can't yet, you will be able to do something. So students should feel that as well. And autonomy, which you talked about, different than independence, is not about doing it alone, but it's really about knowing yourself and exercising your agency in alignment with your goals and aspirations. And we know from science that when we are supporting autonomy, like you said, Erika, we are supporting all other needs, all needs for relatedness, because I trust you to take the right call on your learning, and competence, because we believe you are competent to drive your own learning. So that's a bit the big picture, but if you want specifics, I have shared also 30 practices that can be used in kind of all schools, I believe, but that makes it a bit more visible and tangible. So these will be in the resources as well.
Thank you, Fanny. We'll be sharing all these resources via email to all participants that signed up for this conference, for this session. Kirsten.
Hi, Erika. Hello, everybody. I just want to pick up, first of all, on what you said, Erika, about autonomy. We talk a lot in our constructs about agentic action takers and also ownership of learning with the students. And one of the things I did observe when the school closure crisis hit was that schools and teachers who had these practices actually transitioned a lot more easily than schools and teachers who were in very content-driven control environments. So where the teachers were given trust and where they and their organization had a flexible mindset to say, how can we turn this around? How can we shift the learning? Where is the learning? Where are the learning possibilities? Where they were given time to like reconstruct and build relationships rather than push through delivery, there was a lot less stress, and B, I'm completely convinced, a lot more learning. So I think this is something, you know, that I hope, and we're going to talk about disruption, I know, coming up, but this is something that I hope that we can continue to build from and grasp this opportunity to actually see what makes learning happen and not kind of be stuck in our ways. When it comes to specifics, my go-to is always growth mindedness. And I've been privileged throughout the year to work with many, many educators, older educators as well, who've come on very nervous. I haven't even been on the internet before, and now I have to do this. And, you know, being able to support them and with the team support them in developing their tech skills. So you've seen the people, I think as it's been mentioned before, that have the growth mindset, that want to keep on learning, and the ones who are kind of frozen and a little bit stuck. But my main go-to throughout all of this and throughout most of my life has always been a circle of influence. And I just would like to share that with you briefly, if that's okay, because it's a really great strategy developed by Stephen Covey, and I think actually sits really nicely with Habits of Mind as well, which is about what is within your control, what is within your influence, and letting go of that which is not. So I just put through a little thing, you know, what is in my control at the moment, just to give you an example. And I encourage you to do this for yourself because it's very, very releasing, and it really affirms what your capacities are. You know, it makes you capable again. It really enhances that this is who I am, and I'm making a stand, and this is what I believe in, this is what I can manage, this is what I can do. Then the next step is the influence step, and that to me is really important, particularly because I have a bit of a, I guess some people would say, a helper complex. And also, if you look at 16 personalities, I'm definitely the campaigner. But what we can influence and who we can influence around us is extremely meaningful. I deeply believe that I got through this crisis easier because I was very focused on what I could do with my privileges to help others. And that brought me an enormous amount of contact and community throughout a very dark time. And then the third part is, what do I need to accept? And there are lots of things I can't do anything about. So why would I throw energy at them? Why would I throw energy and time and resources at things that I can't change? If I can just accept them, then I can move forward, and I'm able to focus much more on my core, what I can do to keep myself sane, and what I can do and how I can interact with others and support them as well. And what that does for me is it keeps me more positive. So, you know, whatever works for you, that's my strategy. But really, if we can come as much as possible from a positive mindset, from a gratitude mindset, and I know there's a lot of, let's say, I think Fanny brought it up, you know, it's not to say that we need to be fake about it and say that it's all right. But I can remember a very, very dark time way before this where I would literally start by saying, I'm grateful to have a bed to sleep in. I'm grateful to have a roof over my head. I'm grateful to have food in my belly. And I think sometimes I benefit a lot from the time that I spent in Africa, because I know so many people who don't have what I have, that it makes me exceedingly grateful for what I do have and what I think I can do with it. It makes me feel wealthy and capable. And I think that you can either be in a scarcity mindset or you can be in a capacity mindset. So it's a choice. And I know that Bena has a lot more to say on those things and a lot more resources than I do. So I'm going to stop.
Kirsten, there was a question in chat just asking, will we have access to these slides?
Sure, I'll drop the link in the chat for you and you're welcome to take it and make a copy and do whatever you want to do with it.
Okay, thank you. So I think, again, you know, it's lovely that I have a chance to hear everybody and kind of summarize and synthesize a little bit. But I think the key that we're really basically suggesting, and maybe I'll work backwards from what you just did, Kirsten, because it's really interesting to notice that what you have control over, so what you have control over within yourself, and your circle of control was really about, you know, that you could do some things that were about self-care. When you move to the next circle, which is what you have influence over, sometimes that pushes back against what you have control over, because you believe that you really want to do so much more than you're able to do when you look at what you need to do for yourself. And that was your kind of help addiction, so to speak, which is, I think all of us in education are like, first and foremost, we want to make things better. We want to help. We want to give. We want to care. And so sometimes I think what happens is that if you get to that outer circle, some of the things you wish for most are the things you really can't do a whole lot about, because they're really not in your sphere of control, and they can make you a little nuts just thinking, man, I wish I could do that. I believe it. I want to see it happen. So I see that in this group, which is a small group, a small sample, some of the ways that we've managed to do that is we've written books, because although you can't touch every person, you can have your ideas reach out to touch people. So writing books sometimes is a way to feel like you're doing something more. Some people are doing beautiful Facebook groups. And one of the reasons you're doing that probably is because you can reach out to so many more people and feel that influence without touching every single person. I think that we're really needing to understand that there are a lot of things that we can do, but everything, the two things I just mentioned and a lot more, have to do with your willingness to share your voice, your willingness to say that maybe what I have under my control is my capacity to speak now, to be able to say what I believe, to be able to find the audience for what I believe, and to really make sure that what I'm doing is not just speaking to myself, but if we take those circles and we ask ourselves, if we put in the center that one of the circles of influence that we have is our voice, and where do we see that expanding and growing as we look through those other circles? I think that would be another way, because I think we have not, as a profession, been sufficiently empowered. And when I say empowered, I want to say that empowerment is not something you give to somebody else, because if you're giving it to somebody else, then it's not. You still hold the power and you're saying, hey, this environment, you're empowered. You can go do whatever you want to do. But that's like, I have the power to give to you. If you think about it, empowerment is self. It's really saying, what do I believe within myself that I have the power to do? So in that circle, in the what I have control over, I'd suggest you might just add one more question, which would be, and what do I have the power to do? That is the power of influence, so that in fact, the world might come in a different way to become a better place. Because I think we're all worried about the future and the present, and how we as an international community really begin to voice that power of influence, not just within ourselves, not just within our locality, but also internationally. What does that look like and sound like?
Thank you so much, Bena. This is so rich, both on the practical way and also on the mindset way, right? It's so interesting that in my book on chapter 11, I just opened here, I shared about Benjamin Bloom's strategy to provide a better outcome for students. Although we are very conscious as teachers that we need to do all the things we need to maintain our personal well-being. At the same time, we want to make sure that students are learning, right? So how do we make sure that the outcomes are good? And it's so interesting to see that Benjamin Bloom, 50 years ago, find out that 19 variables to make sure that we have positive academic outcomes for students. And guess what? At the bottom of the list was textbooks, technology, and students' socioeconomic background. So, and it's so interesting that today we're fighting and saying, oh, my students don't have internet access, or my students don't have the appropriate computer, or my students don't have this and don't have that, and we don't have access to this and we don't have access to that. And we forget that the essence of learning, it's what students already have. Every single student already have a brain. And if we can work with that brain in such a way to connect that brain with the heart, which is the intrinsic motivation that students need to learn while they're away, we're solving a whole lot of issues. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a bit about how do we make sure that we have, at the end of the day, the academic outcomes that we at the end expect. And from my side, I'll get started. From my side, I come back to the autonomous learning practice. And I can share that for the students that had the privilege to work with teachers that provide that autonomous learning practice, we had plenty of panels with students from all ages saying that they could finish one full grade in 6-7 months last year. So imagine this, we work with a lot of students in Latin America where they go from January through December is the school year, right? So by August, September, many of them have already covered 100% of the curriculum. And why is that? Because they found that intrinsic motivation that kept them going. So I'll give you just 2 tips to get started with that discovery. First of all, first one is make sure that you help your students to plan their day, right? So it's very simple, although we believe it's simple. Many students do not know that practice. So just plan their day. So start with giving them step by step what to do in one specific day. And very early in the morning, just provide them that. And then little by little, allow your students to plan themselves. What would you do from 9 to 10? And allow students to discuss what they will do, either personally or as a group. Very, very simple. That's planning, because that is the very first big step to make sure that students become autonomous learners. And the second thing is to discover that intrinsic motivation, allow your students to find their own resources. So let's say that you're studying science, clouds, allow your students to find, like, let's say, if your students like sports, allow them to connect sports with clouds. If they like music, allow them to find a song that is related to clouds. And you see the intrinsic motivation little by little flourish. So those 2 things to get started. We have a lot more, but I'm gonna be like Fanny here, because if I can talk forever about this. So let's go to let's hear Fanny.
Well, that's my favorite topic, motivation. So I've come across actually a very nice, of course, self-determination theory that I'm reading every day is about explaining the difference. Oftentimes people think that motivation is extrinsic and intrinsic only, and it's like a type, but it's more about the quality of the motivation. I think maybe that can be a cool thing to share here is, we cannot, like Bena said, we cannot make people empowered. We cannot make people motivated. I mean, we can, extrinsic motivation can work pretty well when you are putting people in a cage and you're forcing them to do something. But when they stop liking when they have a chance to open the cage, they don't want to be in the cage. So what we're talking about here is understanding the motivation, the quality of it, and the more autonomous the motivation is, the better. We are closer to intrinsic motivation. So we have a motivation that's, I have zero motivation. I don't have relatedness. I don't want to be there. That is really difficult because we need to really look at the cause and the psychological aspects here. Then extrinsic motivation has actually 4 sub motivations, like external regulation and introjections that are really ego driven and really unhealthy. We are manipulating people to do certain things. Then we have identification and integration, where we are trying to give a sort of a rationale to students. So let's say they've got to learn this math thing because they have it on the test, and that test is their diploma, so they gotta do it, right? So we're trying to give them connected to how this can be important for them. They can identify or they can integrate it even within their frame of reference, and then they are more likely to engage. And then of course we have intrinsic motivation. So these are some of the things I'm trying to articulate and make different examples to share it back, because I think as educators, if we understand quality motivation, we are more likely to intentionally create and co-construct the conditions with our learners. And that's my attempt with those 30 practices that I'm sharing. For example, so I kind of cut it in 3 parts: attending to the heart, exercising the mind, and engaging the willpower. So the first part would be relatedness and different things we can do. For example, encouraging students rather than praising. There's a fine difference here, and that can make a big difference between external regulation and intrinsic one. Exercising the mind, for example, engaging students in reflection very often, supporting perseverance. And then engaging the willpower, for example, can be teaching intelligent disobedience, or sparking and their curiosity, sustaining it, letting them choose what they're interested in, and connecting it, like you said, Erika, earlier, also to their learning. But I'm going to stop here because, again, I'm going to be going on and on.
Kirsten, would you like to chip in?
Yeah, Erika, everything you say makes me smile, but it's because I'm Scottish. And, I started teaching in 1993, and we ran what we called an integrated day. And what an integrated day is, we put everything up on the board and we circle the parts, the groups where they have to meet with the teacher, and the rest of the time the kids just organize themselves. So, I sometimes just feel like we're going around in circles. And one of the things that people who know me know, I get very irritated when people talk about British education, because it doesn't exist. You've got English curriculum and you've got Scottish education, and they're 2 completely different things. And I'm flabbergasted when I hear people talking about new initiatives that have been going on in my country for years and years and years and years. So, a few things, just a few pointers, really. The whole point about giving student agency, it's locus of control. Locus of control is really important. Who has the power in the classroom, and how are you using it? How are you sharing it? So for me, it's all about setting up the classroom community, and whether that's virtual, whether it's in the school, it's really important that we set up the classroom community for how we're going to work together. And I remember my very, very first class when we were doing James and the Giant Peach, and I was James, and they had to be the mean aunts being mean to me, James. And these kids were not used to a teacher who was giving them power, even in a dramatic way. But that was how we brought it in, to get them to understand that the teacher didn't always have to be in charge. But absolutely, if you want kids to be motivated, we need a few things. We need purpose, we need context, and we need choices. Okay, not everybody is the same. And so, you know, I think I've just been the luckiest educator in the world sometimes. My very, very first head teacher, lovely Edinburgh lady called Mrs. Patterson, she said to me in the interview, she said, children are not biscuits. This is not a factory. We cannot make them all the same. And, you know, whenever I get into conversations or I read about standardization, it makes my hair stand up on end. It really does, because this whole conversation about being behind when you're looking at standards, it's so inappropriate when you come to be talking about learning. But what's the way through? Be subversive. Do it your way. Be the water that filters through the cracks. Okay, so I've had to work in schools that do standardized tests and standardization, and I just say, okay, so I have to move the children towards these standards. They're like, yes, 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 and you have to follow this program. And I say, okay, and then I do it my way. And you know what? All the kids get there. They all grow. They all move towards the standards. But we did it our way. We found our way. We valued each other. We built community. We enjoyed learning. We felt powerful. We took ownership. We had agency. We made choices. And the locus of control was with the kids. We still were successful. So be subversive. Find your way and do it your way.
I can't hear you, Erika.
Liz, yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I figured you were asking me, but I couldn't hear you say it. But anyway, beautiful, beautiful. Everything that everybody has said is really so powerful. Here's the challenge that I would ask of us. If we really believe that that's the best way for kids to learn, how come our professional learning doesn't do that for our teachers? Why is it that when we have professional learning opportunities, those opportunities are so restrictive, are so authoritative, are so administratively designed that we never really have the chance to do the three things that we're talking about? One is, how do we really return to what our purpose really is? Like, why are we learning what we're learning? What purposeful understanding do we have? If we were to ask ourselves, well, what is it that the context is for this? What is it that we're trying to do so that we're really able to make this what we believe is right in our locality with our children at this moment? And then finally, if we were to be asking ourselves, what choices do we give ourselves? Because the choices that you make, Kirsten, may not be the same as my choices, but so what? The point is that we're really being asked to think carefully about our choices and to realize that the external drive to make us do what someone else out in legislator land believes is right is not really what we need to do when we see 30, 35 kids in front of us and we have to figure out how to make it work. And so having that opportunity, and that means that professional learning is not an event. It has to have continuity. That's the power of the groups. That's the power of what we're learning even today, is that we need to really think together. We need to solve these problems together. And we really need to have continuity in our learning and more autonomy as a profession to learn on behalf of what we think is right for our kids, and then develop a way to talk about it. Last thing that I would say is that all of this, when we talk about autonomy and learning and all of those things, depends heavily on reflection. And Fanny, you touched on it, and certainly it's a big, big thing to me too. But I think if we don't name what we're learning, then I think we're still going to be in the hole of always reinventing it. So I think that the importance of this is not to wait for the academicians to name it. We have to name it as we go on behalf of ourselves and our children. So I think that that's just another really important piece, which is metacognition. In our habits of mind, we call it thinking about your thinking. That awareness, that capacity to be able to say more and be more metacognitive is what strengthens what you're talking about, Erika, which is I have autonomy, but I also know why and how I'm using that autonomy on behalf of what.
Thank you, Bena. Yes. Closing remarks from each of us. I'll get started. I come back to a famous say that is attributed to many, many different people, but it's actually unknown from an unknown author, is if not now, then when? And if not us, then who? People, this is our opportunity. This is the time. COVID is a blessing at the end. Of course, I mean, we suffered a lot, but it's also a blessing in terms of our professional development. This is our chance to make a difference. This is our chance to establish something new and something that works. So go for it. You have the whole world. We have different Fannies in Europe, Kirsten is in Asia, Bena and I are in the Western world. So let's make it happen. This is our chance right now. And we're the ones that can actually make the difference, not only for ourselves, our profession, but also for our children. So Fanny, final words, please.
Yeah, I can connect also to, again, I think this is a time, like Daniel Pink says, we are in a midpoint and we can either spark or slump. So we can go back and slump, right? We can go back and just do what we did before. And at the end of the day, we will have to change eventually, because this is inevitable. Because I believe we are not in a time of disruption, but in an age of disruption. So the problems already existed before the pandemic, but they're really visible now. So it is a time of reflection. Everybody's making all sorts of realizations, and we have collective awareness about things that really are ego-centric, ego-driven. We are running schools as from that point of view, from a leader, not leadership point of view, or a hero, kind of trying to change things. And I think we need to think about reflection in action. Otherwise, there is no reflection. We need to do something. So for me, it's been to create a group that I'm really getting started with. I'll share the link on the chat. Is totally just a self-organized group for people to share their ideas and come up with actions. And we don't know yet which action, because that is the true spirit of complex leadership and emergence. And the new type of leadership that I think we need to embrace is the one that is not centered around the person, the leader, but around the movement of change that everybody can exercise in a system. And schools are systems, which I hope will become more ecosystem than ecosystems. This is kind of my mission, to try to bring that wherever I can. So that is my final reflection. Let's move to action.
Thank you, Fanny. Kirsten?
Okay, so self-care, is not selfish. Okay, take care of yourself first. You can't help. It's the old metaphor of put on your oxygen mask before you put it on anybody else. Okay, take care of yourself. If you don't look after yourself, you cannot help anybody else. So make that time for you. And I know mums are the worst. Mums, make time for yourself. It helps everybody. Okay. 2, we've never been more connected. We have mammoth networks. If anybody had told me this time last year that I'd be emailing with Jay McTighe and Ron Richard, I'd have fallen on the floor laughing. It's crazy. Reach out, make connections, ask questions, ask for help, make suggestions, use your voice. Okay. 3, don't live in fear, live in hope. Okay. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's challenging, but we're here. Other people are here. There's lots of people who want to help. 4, leverage your resources. You all have them. It starts here. Okay. We all have internal resources. Our resources are not only external. We all have resources. We have personal capacities. We have things we're capable of doing. We have networks. Leverage them. Use them to achieve what you want. And number 5, My favorite learning of the last 10 years, go with the flow. Go with the flow doesn't mean let go. It means move with what's working. When you hit a brick wall, leave it alone, move back from it, move in a different direction. If you don't like the conversation, change the conversation. And I'm going to leave you with my favorite quote, because I've loved this quote for so many years, and it's very significant for me on what's happened for me personally and for my contacts this year, which is Margaret Mead, a very old quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you, Erika.
Thank you, Kirsten. Bena, final remarks?
Wow. Well, that Margaret Mead quote has been one that has driven me for a long time, and I totally love it. So that's wonderful. And all I can say, maybe just to add it, because you've all said it so beautifully. So I'll just add one other possibility, and that is, remember how much we learned by the Diary of Anne Frank, and start to realize that you all are caretakers of primary source material. This is a moment that you're living through. This is a time that you're living through. It's not a moment, it's a time. And to really record that in some way, very personally, but just keep your journals, because the journals, I think, will help you not only to do all the things that we've said about how to become more active, but also they become that opportunity to really understand what's been going on at this time and your thoughts about it. And then I would say that if you encourage your students to do the same, I think that we will have an incredible legacy of information from the year of 2020, from March to March, and to the point where we are now, where we are, such as it is, who knows? But I think it's like keeping track of that. We are really the caretakers of some very important history right now. So I encourage you to remember that as well.
I love that, Bena. And thank you to all of you. And it's such also a great tie-in that we are having our virtual event this year, and it's going to be called Reboot Resilience, Rebound Remarkable. And every single session will deal with how we can all rebound, whether we're teachers or students, and there will be students on every single panel that we'll have, and we'll be launching with Earth Week. So want to invite you all to that, and anybody who's joined us today, but also just want to say this was an incredible session, and I think so timely with all the perspectives that you all shared. And we look forward to, we have a newsletter read by 12,000 people a day, and we'll have this link tomorrow so that it can be shared out widely, through our networks. So you guys did a great job. And any other final comments or questions?
Well, just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Fanny, Kirsten, and Dr. Bena Kallick for your contributions. And let's get that going.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye.
you guys. Thanks, Celeste, for driving the bus here. We'll see you all soon. Have a great week. Bye-bye.